Welcome to this special edition of Talk Time. My guest today is Mr. G.K. Pillai, former Union Home Secretary. Mr. G.K. Pillai, welcome to this special edition of Talk Time.
Thank you.
Mr. Pillai, you see, the government has clarified many things in the last few days over issues of nationality and citizenship. None other than our Prime Minister has said that there is no question of nationwide NRC, there is no talk of the nationwide NRC, and he has also said that the NRC has no links with the National Population Register that the government is planning. Yet, the people does not seem to be convinced with what the government is saying. Your take?
I think the confusion has arisen primarily because for quite some time now and in Parliament, the Union Home Minister as well as other BJP leaders have been talking about both the CAA and then the NRC following. Very clearly, even the President's address to both Houses of Parliament talked of the NRC being implemented in India. Right. So there is this, that if the Union Home Minister makes a statement in Parliament, then it obviously has the weight of the government. Subsequently, of course, the Prime Minister clarified that there has been no discussion on NRC in the Cabinet or in Parliament. I think that is partly true because the President's address would have been approved by the Cabinet, and if mention of NRC is there, that means the Cabinet has approved that also. So there is therefore an element of confusion in the minds of people as to what exactly is the NRC only deferred, or is the government going to completely drop NRC. I think if the government comes out with a statement saying that we are no longer going to do an NRC, I think that would possibly calm things down.
Mr. Pillai, you had been the Home Secretary. My question is, what do you think the government should do in such a situation to clear the air, to clear the confusion all around that seems to be prevailing?
See, I think first, of course, let me just say that the National Population Register, which issue came up when in the UPA and when I was the Union Home Secretary, it actually followed the 26/11 attacks, and when the 2011 census data was also available, it was decided to set up the National Population Register, and we actually did the identity cards based on this as a pilot project in all the coastal villages all over India, right from West Bengal to Kanyakumari to Gujarat. At that stage, the issue of also Aadhaar came in, and then it became an issue whether you needed Aadhaar was better or the National Population Register was more effective. And I think at that time, initially, it was NPR was for half the country and Aadhaar for the other half, and they said we'll test and see how it goes. But then Aadhaar took off. It possibly was marketed much better than the NPR, and you had the Cabinet Committee on Aadhaar itself under the UPA. And finally, Aadhaar therefore finally became the means of identity of the people, proof of identity for all the Indians and others who are residing in India. And therefore, the NPR, which took off simultaneously with Aadhaar, actually because of lack of funds and so on, it sort of literally, I wouldn't say it died, but it sort of went into hibernation as Aadhaar then became available to all the people in India. So I am therefore a little surprised that now you are again coming back to NPR, because NPR is actually would just be a duplication of all the money that you have spent on Aadhaar.
See, the nation is at this moment witnessing a countrywide agitation or movement against the Citizenship Amendment Act. Suddenly there is talk of the National Population Register, which the government is pushing ahead with. Now, the NPR was first initiated during the UPA regime in 2010-11. You are well aware of that. At that time, there was not many questions asked, but now apparently the questions like date and place of birth of an individual's parents are also going to be asked. Now the people are thinking whether the NPR is also going to transform into a citizenship list at some point in time. What do you think?
See, one is not sure because earlier the questions that were asked in the NPR didn't have any of these, because Aadhaar was not there. Nobody asked of date of birth and so on, place of birth and so on. So we will have to wait and see in the updated Aadhaar which this government is planning to bring out. And I heard the Union Home Minister talk about an app, and each individual person who is within India has to fill up on the app itself online and submit the data. So we'll have to see what are all the columns and what are all the data that are being called for in this app to really find out whether is it a halfway house to the NRC or is it just an NPR. So we'll have to wait and see till the app and its details of what information is being called for in the app comes out to really take a view whether this is a backdoor entry for the NRC.
But Mr. Pillai, how many databases does the government need or does the country need at the end of the day? What is that document or what is that set of documents that can clinch one's citizenship issue or nationality question?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there are far too many. Got the voters ID, which means that you are a citizen if you are the assembly and other elections. You've got the passport, which also says that you are a citizen. Aadhaar, of course, is not a proof of citizenship. Therefore, government will have to finally take a call on what is the final one document which will prove your citizenship. And I think it is much easier for the government to do it by exception. That is, people who've got a passport, automatically citizens of India. People who have got a voter's ID, you should treat them as citizens of India and then say that that is one document which is proof of citizenship, rather than have any number of documents and ask for different basis, because it's always better to find no country really proves citizenship by doing an exercise for the entire population. They do it only for those who are inverted commas illegal migrants, and that is possible to find out through a much easier method than doing this entire exercise for 130 crore people.
Now you see, there is also talk of the government of India planning to issue something called the National Identity Card to every citizen. Now the question therefore arises, a lot of people are asking whether or not the passport is the ultimate document to prove one's citizenship or nationality. And of course, one is aware of the fact that passport is not something that the masses have. Very many people do not have passports. We know that, but what do you think?
Yeah, passport, of course, passport, not too many people in India have passports. There are millions of people, I think hundreds of millions of people, especially in rural areas and in the tribal areas, who don't have passport, because at the moment they are not even thinking of perhaps even leaving their village. They are not thinking of going out of the country. So if you look at only passport, then only a very limited number of people would be treated as Indian citizens. The voters ID card, which is given by virtue of some element of verification, could be one proof that if you have a voter's ID card, then you could be treated as an Indian citizen. So I think the government will really have to take a view that which is the document, or one or two documents, which will prove that you are an Indian citizen. And those who don't have either of these can then come and apply for these and become a citizen of India.
Mr. Pillai, do you think that the government may have misread the possible impact of the Citizenship Amendment Act? If I ask you to carry out a cost-benefit analysis of coming up with a CAA, for the government, what could it possibly be? What could be your conclusion?
The issue of people coming from other countries into India and they're getting citizenship is already covered under the earlier Citizenship Act. people who have come and stayed in India for more than, I think it was 11 years, are eligible to become citizens of India, provided, of course, you get there is no adverse police or an IB clearance and so on. So if I remember, I'm not exactly sure of the numbers, but something like about 19 lakh foreigners, bulk of them from Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and so on, have already been given citizenship papers by the ministry. If government was really worried about people who are in India from any country in the world or these three countries who have faced religious persecution or otherwise, and you wanted to give them citizenship, you can give them citizenship, and that has been done over the last 70 years. So, because from 11 years you could have done that, just made 11 years, 5 years and said it's applicable to everybody, and it is always the discretion of the government of India to give citizenship to any person or not.
All right. On that note, we'll go for a short break, but don't go away. I'll be right back in conversation with Mr. G.K. Pillai, former Union Home Secretary. Welcome back. I am in conversation with Mr. G.K. Pillai, former Union Home Secretary. Do you think, that government would have done well to have gone for a national debate or try to work out some kind of a consensus before, going ahead with such radical laws like this amendment to the citizenship law that has facilitated grant of citizenship to minorities from Afghanistan, Pakistan and Bangladesh who have come to India till 31st of December 2014. Do you think a national debate or a consensus could have done well for the government?
See, government could have allowed it to have, there are certain concerns. I mean, in the Northeast, the concern is not whether, the Muslims were excluded. The concern was more of any illegal foreigner should not be given citizenship because that was affecting the, the identity and the culture of the local people. So there is need for a debate because you did the entire exercise of NRC in Assam primarily to allay those concerns. And then on the back door, you're again bringing the CAA, which actually sort of nullifies 50% of what the NRC exercise was all about. So I think there was need for a little bit more nuanced discussion and giving citizenship to those who were, say, religious persecution, including who are Muslims have been persecuted like the Ahmadiyyas and the Bohras and so on. They have also been persecuted in Pakistan and they have come across. So it is possible for government to decide whether to give them a citizenship or not. And that is the sovereign right of a government. And the government could have gone ahead and done it purely by administrative directions than to bring in a new act which created so much of doubt and fear in people's minds.
You see, now there is an argument by the government leaders, NDA government leaders, that most of these initiatives like the NPR or for that matter, even there was a move to grant citizenship to these people from these three neighboring countries, the minorities who have left these places for religious persecution. The argument is that most of these initiatives were, done during the UPA regime and that the present government is only executing them. This is the argument. Do you buy this argument? What do you think?
See, as I mentioned, the NPR and the Aadhaar were, what shall I say, two competing schemes. And the Aadhaar won out, the NPR actually then died a slow death. Yeah. So now you are resurrecting NPR, which means that the entire Aadhaar exercise was a waste of money because if you are getting NPR, then Aadhaar then becomes useless. Whereas you've now made Aadhaar into a mandatory thing for so many areas, including bank accounts and pensions and so on and so forth. So to, I think, just take a step back, reflect on what has been done, what needs to be done, and find out what is the real purpose of why you want an NPR. Is it the NPR of the UPA or is it an NPR NDA government of the BJP government? And therefore, and if it is plus, the government then should come out in public and say, we are asking for these additional details for the following reasons, which if the government means it is not for citizenship but only for identification, then they should come out clearly and say this is what is really the intention behind the government in bringing this NPA or NPA plus plus.
Again, Mr. Pillai, the government leaders are now saying that the CAA, the mass upsurge that the nation is witnessing, is the result of misinformation, a systematic misinformation campaign carried out by the opposition leaders. Is it as simple as that? What is the real, why are people so agitated? Why are people coming out to the streets, according to you?
I think the government underestimated the extent of the apprehensions in the minds of quite a large number of the section of the population, especially Muslims, on both the CAA, which excluded foreigners of Muslim religion, and then when it was said that this is the precursor to the NRC, they saw that what happened in Assam and the problems, the administrative problems, bureaucratic problems, as well as the difficulties that many people faced in providing the documentation, I think that was one big fear that triggered part of the protest. And I think the second element was actually, I think, what I would call as the severe police action in Jamia and other places, which also mobilized the students who realized that this is something which is going to affect them. And then you had this nationwide government.
You see, in Assam, the state government leaders are now saying that 31st December 2014 is the cutoff date. How can any people come after that date? So whoever is already there are the only people who are going to get citizenship, the minorities from Bangladesh, Pakistan or Afghanistan. And the government has come up with a figure of say 5 lakh plus. That's about all. Now, this is an argument that the state government is saying that there is no need to fear.
See, I think if in Assam the entire exercise, NRC exercise has been done, whether it is finally rejected or not. So you've really found that only 19 lakh people are non-citizens. The rest are all citizens. So in Assam, the actual element is actually currently, if the NRC exercise is not cancelled, it's 19 lakhs. So you're going to get, how many of those 19 lakhs are going to get citizenship is the real issue. The problem is because you have the Assam Accord, which talks of 24th March 1971 as the cutoff date. If you are changing the cutoff date, then I think you needed to have the consultations with the Assam government and the ASU and so on, who spearheaded the agitation against the foreigners in the 80s. So the Assam Accord needs now to be revised, and that can only be done by discussion across the table.
Mr. Pillai, inner line permit. First of all, my first question is, do you think inner line permit could be a good antidote to the Citizenship Amendment Act? Because several of the northeastern states that have been covered by the inner line system have been exempted from the purview of the CAA. Some of the states are Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Mizoram, and now Manipur. Even Meghalaya is passed and introduced an ILP bill in the state assembly. And of course, some of the hill districts in Assam as well exempted. Now, is ILP a good antidote to the CAA?
See, the ILP is not an antidote to the CAA. It is actually it is supposed to be prevent outsiders coming into the state. And we've seen that is really not happening, because even in spite of the ILP being there, say in Nagaland, you found so many people who have come from outside the state, the local village councils and sometimes local communities have actually given land to the outsiders to come in and build their houses and their religious structures. So ILP is not really the answer. And for if you want, as I said, India to be one and not have so many restrictions for people from the rest of India to move to other parts of India. ILP, in fact, which was a colonial inheritance, should actually be phased out over a period of time, in the next 30, 40, 50 years, and you should provide other safeguards to, shall I say, protect the both the land as well as the other identity of the local communities. And because
you see, student groups like the All Assam Students' Union are now asking the question, if the Citizenship Amendment Act is bad for the 6 scheduled areas or the states covered by the inner line permit system, why is it good for a state like Assam? This is the question that groups like the ASU has been asking. What is your answer to this question?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think for Assam, it's a totally different issue which is concerned, because you already have an agreement on the Assam Accord, and for the government, I think the first priority should be to get the Assam Accord implemented in full before you then move to other issues like the CAA and so on.
Now, in this discourse on the citizenship and the nationality issue, you know, the Assam Accord is often referred to. That has 25th March 1971 as the cut-off date. My question is the Assam Accord sacrosanct? Can it be regarded as a sacrosanct piece of document? Many in the present government in Assam even do not consider the Assam Accord as sacrosanct.
I'm not so sure. It is in one sense, yes, it is an agreement. It's a solemn agreement because it was an agreement signed between the Ministry of Home Affairs and ASU in the presence of the Prime Minister, the Union Home Minister and others. So to that extent, there is a certain moral standing to that accord. If I remember right, some elements of that Assam Accord have also got implemented into the amendments to the Citizenship Act also. So when you are amending that Citizenship Act in violation of the Assam Accord, I think it would have been necessary to have sat down with ASU and the Assam government and so on and worked out a solution which meets the interests of everybody. And that is where I think the government was a little bit hasty.
You know, there is a talk of the Assam Accord. Continuing with that, Mr. Pillai, the clause 6, central government has set up a high power committee to go into the clause 6, come up with recommendations. My question is, do you think if clause 6 would have been implemented before, the impact that street agitations that we are seeing would have been much less, people would have been less apprehensive, because clause 6 provides for constitutional, legislative and administrative safeguards for the Assamese people. What do you think, Mr. Pillai?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there was too much delay in implementing the provisions of clause 6 and that always was a grievance of the people of Assam, that clause 6 was never seriously taken note of by the government, and therefore there is that element of what shall I say, betrayal or lack of credibility on the part of the government of India in the eyes of the Assamese people. They've set up a committee now, I understand, which is supposed to look into it. Perhaps the CAA should be deferred in the state of Assam till the recommendations of that committee are made and then accepted by the government, and then possibly we can find a way forward thereafter.
Finally, what is the road ahead? How can all this prevailing all-round confusion be removed in your take, in your view?
See, one of the big issues I think which you need a nationwide debate is on this issue of migration. International migration is now a fact of life all over the world, and people migrate for economic reasons, people migrate for climate reasons, people migrate because of religious persecution, people migrate for a variety of reasons. Therefore, now this is something which is, you cannot stop it. I mean, the United States is trying very hard to prevent migration coming across. It's just not possible because there is requirement for people of different economic abilities and skills in all parts of the world. Japan has now got thousands of migrants. They're legal migrants who are coming in because they need those many people. Germany has got thousands and thousands of people from Turkey and others living in Germany, finally getting German citizenship, and the process of adjustment into their society is coming in. There are other countries who do it, like I'm from Kerala, and you've got millions of Keralites in the Gulf who go and work there for sometimes decades, but they continue to remain Indian citizens. They get only a work permit. So they work on that basis, and at the end of their productive life, when they are 60 or 65, they come back to Kerala. So government has to decide what is our policy in terms of migration, and once we work out that policy of migration, we decide to give work permits. Then those people with work permits, they don't get any voting rights, they don't get other civil rights, etc. And that is a way by which people are then aware of the situation, and there is no apprehension of loss of identity and so on.
All right, Mr. G.K. Pillai, thank you very much indeed for speaking to me on Talk Time.
Thank you. Thank you.